Twits by Roald Dahl. The Twits lived in an old and dirty house without any windows and a smelly kitchen. Mr. Twit was one of these very hairy-faced men. The whole of his face, except his forehead, his eyes, and his nose, were covered with thick hair. Mr. Twit was a fallen and smelly old man. Mrs. Twit, have you ever seen a woman with an uglier face than that? I doubt it. If a person has ugly thoughts, it begins to show on his face. And when that person has ugly thoughts every day, every week, every year, the face gets uglier and uglier until it gets you so ugly that you can't hardly bear to look at it. Mrs. Twit had a glass eye that always was looking in the other way. Episode 1. One morning, Mrs. Twit took out her glass eye and dropped it into Mr. Twit's mug of beer when he wasn't looking. Mr. Twit sat there, drinking his beer slowly.
Whenever you go all quiet, I know that you are plotting something.
Suddenly, as Mr. Twit tipped the last drop of the beer down, he caught sight of Mrs. Twit's awful glass eye staring up at him from the mug. Episode 2. The next day, Mrs. Twit dug up some worms. She cooked spaghetti for lunch, and she mixed the worms with the spaghetti, but only on her husband's plate.
Hey, my spaghetti is moving.
It's a new kind, Mrs. Twit said, taking a mouthful from her own plate, which, of course, had no worms.
I found them very tasty. I found it rather bitter,
Mr. Twit said.
You wanna know why your spaghetti was squishy?
Why?
Because it was worms!
Episode 3. To pay her back for the glass eye in his beard, Mr. Twit decided he would put a frog in Mrs. Twit's chair. Mrs. Twit sat on her chair. Then, all at once, she felt something cold and slimy crawling all over her feet. She screamed, "Help!" Mrs. Twit fainted. The end.